shortly. Bienvenue. Welcome to what is, in fact, the third of our 4 property podcasts. Today is called Property Quorum, and it's a bun fight between a bunch of property professionals, and with me in the middle as the clown prince trying to keep order. Today's topic is one which I'm fairly and squarely going to be pointing at Zara Oliwukas, our tame lawyer, which of course is the future of property law is waiting. But before we do that, just let me introduce you to Hamish McClay, for whom we set up the channel in the first place, and Silas J. Lees, who is part and runs the Maverick Movement, also WikiWam, a notable property website of cooperative, I would say. But before that, Hamish McClay, would you start us off?
Well, we tried to start this conversation earlier, but Zara was otherwise committed, so she couldn't join us. So it was largely Silas and I who were bemoaning the absence of the number of property lawyers that we would like to actually see sort of out there in the field to sort of help us out, because things aren't getting actually any easier for the property lawyer. They aren't getting any easier for conveyancing, with even so much more information actually sort of coming through. And the major concern is with the number of lawyers who've been about for some years who chose to get involved with property law many, many years ago, a lot of them are now retiring and sort of moving on. And some of them actually not even retirement age, is sort of retiring out of conveyancing. And our big concern is, what are we going to do? Because there is a definite shortage of property lawyers. We do need sort of quality property lawyers. And as we well know, Zara is certainly one of those, because she's a very conscientious soul too. And she's fundamentally looking after the interests of her client. She's not looking after the interests of the estate agent, who basically just wants to get his property sold sometimes. Not always, of course, but very, very often it's Zara who's going to be getting to the bottom of what the client really needs and making it best for the client, even against their better judgment on occasions. But I mean, the important thing is, of course, what we do have to do is sort of keep that sort of client informed of their best interests. And there aren't enough lawyers about there doing that at this moment in time.
Well, I'm afraid I'm going to go straight over to Zara. Welcome to the show. The future of property law is waiting. What makes the view of that?
Well, there's a huge shift to removing people from the front lines and replacing them with AI. There's already been a shift from having qualified solicitors do the job to having anybody that calls themselves a case handler doing the job. And this was allowed by the Legal Services Act in 2007. So I started back in 2002, and I was sold the dream that, qualify as a solicitor and, you get a good salary, etc., etc. You're sold the dream, and you see all these high salaries from the city firms, which doesn't reflect what actually goes on in your average local high street practice. And what's happened is the race to the bottom. So the people that actually know what they're doing are actually the last port of call, and the running around is being done by people on the front lines who probably don't have that much experience, who don't, have that grounding and understanding on how to handle clients, and that, people are leaving in droves because they're just getting abused from people, because people don't get what they want when they want it. And it's, you have to sort of give people the heads up as to what to expect, how long it's going to take. And a lot of people can't deal with uncertainty, but I think people need to make their peace with uncertainty and know that if it's meant for them, it will work out.
But I thought AI was supposed to simplify and make everything so much easier.
It's supposed to, but who's supervising the AI? Because it just comes out with gibberish. And I had a client run my reports through AI, and they sent me 3-4 pages of questions, and I looked at it and I said, well, you know, you've run my reports through AI. If you'd actually bothered to read them, you'd see that the answers are already there.
So it's not AI, it's the fault. It's the people running the AI, I guess.
That too, and also people just wanting things handed to them on a plate. What I realise is that people don't read things anymore, and they don't want to be told, you know, the bad news or the things are going to be bumpy. They just want, you know, a smooth ride in a Range Rover Sport without the bumps. So, you know, it's one or the other. You can't have everything, you know, for cheap as chips and not expect bumps along the way. So
other brands are available, of course.
Yes.
But what you've told me many times, usually with your eyes rolling skyward, is that you tell a lot of people about the problems that will be coming, and a lot of them just want to disregard all that and run full speed because all they want is the keys.
Yeah, they do. They do. And especially with leasehold properties, you know, we had a lot of backlash saying that, you know, conveyancers aren't advising buyers of the differences between freehold and leasehold. And that surprised me, because you would have thought that before anybody goes to look at a property, they'd try and understand the differences, but they don't. They just see the price and can I have it? And the estate agent says, yes, you can have it. And so they go, yeah, okay, I want my keys next week. And it doesn't quite work like that.
Wow. Silas, what a tangled web we weave. And it seems that web has become more and more tangled, but don't worry, AI is here to figure it out.
Well, it's a wonderful ruse, isn't it, Gareth? I mean, if you think about the transaction timeline for property, AI is going to condense that into however long the pundits say it's going to condense it
about
to.
35 minutes, I think.
35 minutes, fantastic. And then, of course, you move into your new property and you will live there for an average of probably about 20 years, if going by current statistics. So it's only when you come to sell in 20 years' time do you actually realize that all of the advice that somebody like Zara was trying to give you will come along and bite you on the backside because you chose to override and ignore that. And I think that's a really important point, that there's a lot of shake-up, a lot of turmoil in the industry at the moment. I read recently that there was a study done, or a survey done informally through one of the biggest legal representative bodies in the UK, where they suggested that 90% of all conveyancers actually wouldn't choose the profession again, basically, if they were coming into it today. And that's a really sad indictment for where things are. And what I see happening, and based on what Zara's just mentioned here, what is happening is they are trying to fit solutions into this race to the bottom model on fees. What is needed is a better business model for conveyancing. And at the moment, that is not being promoted by any of the leadership groups within the industry, from what I can see. And it leads conveyancers down this path to go, well, I need to get all of this volume of work done that I've taken on because I'm paying out so much money in referral fees. So the quickest way to do that is to give it to a junior or give it to AI and hope for the best. And hopium is not really a strategy, it's a drug. And I think there are testing times, challenging times coming. But of course, when that homeowner comes to then claim against that solicitor in 20 years' time, they may not be available. The insurance policy may not be available. And lo and behold, as we've seen with cladding matters, who's left holding the can?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned cladding matters, because as sweet Zara has already pointed out to me, AI is certainly not going to solve the issues with building safety, and the people who built our buildings and landlords who ignore safety legislation. I'm going to come to you about that in a minute, Zara, but what's your thoughts on that, Silas?
Well, it's quite right. And I was one of the most respected legal people in the industry put a post out about this and how AI is actually undermining the legal process. So the The AI models, as I understand it, or as it was explained to me, is they take all of the legislation, break it down into like confetti-like pieces, and then try and assemble it back together in a structured order. And of course, that doesn't really work without coherence. And I think Zara's pointed to a really interesting point. We have this low attention span psychology now within people, where they won't take the time to sit and read it. I mean, you've got to ask the question, if you're not prepared to sit down and read a report from a solicitor when you are spending hundreds of thousands of pounds and you are committing to a mortgage that you're going to have to pay every single month for the next 25 years, there's no hope. I mean, surely there's enough incentive there to actually sit down and spend a couple of hours going through all of this information rather than feeding it into an AI engine and then just hoping for the best. None of that makes sense to me. So I think we're absolutely right. AI isn't going to solve a lot of these problems. These are structural problems that need expertise to address. And as Hamish pointed out right at the start, we've seen a absolute swathe of experienced lawyers that left the profession in 2021. Some have come back in as consultants, but where AI is going to come in now and replace the younger generation, what do we do in 20 or 30 years' time? There's all that fresh blood isn't going to be coming through the industry if all they're going to do is sit at a computer and push buttons for an AI model to do all the work.
Zara, leading on from what you already commented to me about, it seems to me that most of the world seems to be obsessed with low effort prompting, 3 words to describe your entire life history, and the problem with that is we're getting less and less interest in making sure we give the right information up front. So I feel, I'm imbuing AI with a soul here, but I feel kind of sorry for it. It's having to try and come up with the goods. I always think of AI as like a desperately lapping dog. Please, master, what can I do to make you happy? Desperately wants to give you the right answer, or the answer makes you happy, but has no basic information to do with. Is there any hope?
Well, it all depends on the people that program it.
Right.
And you still need a human sitting behind the machine to check it all over. Because it all depends on which AI model you're using. But, you know, at the end of the day, this is a people service. You're trying to look after somebody. It's not what you know, it's who you know. Because it's, AI is not going to give you that comfort to say, yes, your transaction is going to complete next week. AI doesn't know all the steps in between, all the hoops that need to jump through. You know, you've got to satisfy the mortgage lender as well as the client, and they're going to come back and ask questions. So you need somebody to provide a holistic approach and point people in the right direction. The public don't know who to turn to. They think it's their friendly estate agent who works for the seller. It should be the conveyancer, but then, you know, a lot of conveyancers are paying referral fees, so they're not going to say anything that bites the hand that feeds them. And they want to keep that work rolling in because they have bills to pay too. So, you know, every sacrifice comes with a cost. And the person buying needs to realise that they're the one in charge. They need to assemble their team. They need to have all of these professionals on, you know, working for them, not trusting one person to do it all for them. And this is where it breaks apart, because you're relying on one person to do it all for you. You know, sometimes conveyancers get told, oh, are you organising our survey for us? No, we don't organise your survey. You've got to go and find a surveyor. Same with the mortgage brokers. But again, estate agents push their own recommended mortgage brokers onto people. Same with the conveyancers. The estate agents will, they'll push recommended conveyancers onto people, and that conveyancer might not have the required expertise to deal with things such as I do, like shared ownership, and things like that. Staircasing, you know, a lot of simultaneous staircasings with sales and things like that. There's, you know, you do need somebody that knows what they're doing, that can hold your hand through the process. This is the next step. This is what to expect. And if you manage people's expectations at the outset, you get a little bit more patience from them. You know, I give everybody a good old lecture when they ask me for a quote. When they're buying a leasehold, do you really want to buy? And I give them a little free handout to say, you know, these are the questions you need to ask. Come back to me when you know the answers, because the legal structure might not be what you anticipated, especially when agents are saying, oh, it's share of freehold. They think they're getting a freehold title, but it's not. It's a leasehold with part ownership of the freehold title in some kind of structure, whether it's a share or whether they're named as an individual, and everything comes with its own problems. So you do need somebody that knows what they're doing. What you find with the companies that are set up to treat people like tins of beans, which are, it's a processing plant, is that one part is done by one person and you go to the next person. There's no fluidity or continuity, and the person's basically treated like a tin of beans to go on to the next conveyor belt. That's not how people should be treated. You need somebody to hold their hand through the whole process, and especially if you're buying and selling. I call sometimes I call sellers first-time sellers, because they are, well, I haven't sold a house before. How do I do this, and how do I tie it in with a purchase? It's all a real juggling act. So your conveyancers have to be, expert jugglers as well, in managing expectations and trying to set dates and things like that don't work out for people. Might not always work out what people want. And I always say, compromise is required on everybody's part. A bit of give and take.
Wow. So with the industry, Silas, gradually becoming more commoditized, with the process being dumbed down at one end and direct human interaction being reduced at the other, and with the fact that it seems that reading information passed from esteemed experts like Zara, reading stuff seems to be deeply unfashionable at the moment. And then on top of it, you've got things such as referral fees and conditional selling. Your two most favorite topics, I believe.
Well, I think what we're describing here is the impact of lowering standards throughout the entire property industry.
And is that because you're obviating control over to your pet technological whiz-bang IT interface, also known as AI?
Well, I think that's how people are trying to solve the problem without realizing what the problem is that they're actually trying to solve.
Yeah, that would help.
Okay, so that as standards have declined, as Zara pointed out, we pointed to the Legal Services Act. I actually think it's a bit more systemic than that. I think it's this whole idea that a business model that's unsustainable and doesn't work can continue in perpetuity, even though it's devouring the very firms that are working for it. Referral fees do not work for estate agents or conveyancers, okay? People think they do, but when you look at the numbers, they absolutely don't, and I'll challenge anybody on that point. But what we're seeing is the erosion of standards over time continually across the legal, estate agency, and to some extent mortgage advice, which ultimately treats the consumer with contempt. And it also really underlines treating the professionals themselves with contempt. And it's why we're seeing all of these problems starting to come out. And I think high standards really, really matter. If you want to, buy your house quickly and you want to do it safely, you need the expertise of a true professional who's done it before you. And if that costs you a few £1,000s, well, most people are spending £2,000 a year to go away on holiday, yet they won't spend £2,000 for their conveyance, which they're going to live in this house for the next 20 years. None of it makes sense to me. So I think there is a massive education piece here, and that's everybody's responsibility across the entire industry. But it's also a standards issue. I read yesterday there's a competitor coming into the field for us, and they're giving material information away for free. Okay, so they're giving material information away for free. Before that, it was £1 per property. And the problem with all of that is that it ticks a box, but every conveyancer and every estate agent worth their salt knows that to compile comprehensive material information, there is a reasonably significant cost. Not tens of thousands, but it's at least a few £100s to get the searches, to get the data completed that you need in order to transact that property. If you're going to tick a box and you want a free material information solution, that's fine. But it's, again, another example of lowering the standards, which doesn't benefit the consumer, because they're going to have to go, nothing changes in the process other than we've ticked a material information compliance box. but we've then got to go and do the work later on further down the line. So I think this is why I'm so passionate about raising standards in the industry. We've got to get rid of these nefarious practices. These are practices that ensure that people at the top continue to get paid regardless of whether or not people move home. And the statistics are already coming out that this market is getting worse by the day. Estate agents are waiting longer to get paid. Solicitors are waiting longer to get paid. It's not looking good. So it's time for change. And we can carry on doing what we're already doing, but we already know the end result for that. The only way out, I believe passionately, is higher standards.
Well,
can I just chip in there, Silas? I saw that and I thought, well, if they're giving something away for free, there's always going to be a catch. Putting things into a package called upfront information is a Trojan horse, because it looks pretty on the outside, but then when you wheel it in, you're not going to see what's hiding underneath until you start ripping it apart. And it might, no contract pack I've ever received in the 20 plus years I've doing this is perfect. So there's always questions that are going to be asked. You cannot head off every single inquiry at the outset. So, putting things into pretty little boxes is, as much as I like my pretty little boxes, it's not going to make anything go quicker.
One of the benefits of IPSA and IPSA membership is that they don't just give you all the information; they give you the right information. They condense it, and I think this is what worries me. IPSA seems to represent the last bunch of people who are spending time putting the information together so it's the right information rather than everything. And when we move, as the tendency is, towards full automation, you hit a button, you're just going to get a slew of facts, great, of which only 20% are of any use. Hamish, it appears to me that we need to slow down this AI revolution before we end up casting out baby with bathwater.
I think that we need to actually look how we're using AI. AI has significant use, significant application. And just before we say, the organization of IPSA, the Association of Independent Personal Search Agents, what we do, we actually refine information which comes from the local authorities and put that together. That in itself we can actually control. But it's quite interesting because this is a comment that Zara brought up earlier. AI cannot define how long a council is going to take. We've got a query. We keep getting this query, keep coming back from one of these clients. Can't we do something about this council? Why can't you tell me when we can get some information back from St Albans Council? Because St Albans Council don't give us the information. We can't make it up. Do we have to suggest 6 weeks or 5 weeks only to find that we're still wrong at the end of the story? Now, there's nothing anybody, AI included, can actually pick out of this. And all we can do is pick out the worst situation, say, all right, tell you what, call it 8 weeks and we cover everything. But you can complete a transaction in 8 weeks. So the whole thing is absurd. You need that human involvement. You need the professionals involved at the right particular sort of time. And if you get that group of professionals involved, you can't give all that information. As Zara quite pointed out, you can't give every aspect of the information up front. But what you can do is give quality information up front, which can then be taken on by the buying solicitor to say, right, that looks fine so far, but this we need to take a bit more. And I think the situations, it's one of the fascinating things, actually. Every time we have Zara on, she tells us about all the other complications that we've actually got within the process that none of us ever thought about. So if we hadn't, it's a very, very difficult situation. We need the professionals in there, and we need the professionals to be working together rather than actually sort of. Sorry, yeah.
I was just going to chip in there, Hamish. I've got sellers that think everything's hunky dory. Their solicitors or conveyancers put their packs together, and nobody realizes there's a problem until the buyer's solicitor actually looks at it. So even though we are supposed to be checking what goes out, you know, quite a lot of the time, the seller's lawyer hasn't checked what they've sent out. They've just gone tick, tick, tick. We've got these documents and we've sent it across. So you could have a leasehold title where the seller hasn't realised they've got a short lease and the lease needs extending. Or you've got.
But isn't this once again banging a drum, Zara, for making sure you have around you people who are not just conscientious but knowledgeable and are willing to ask the damn questions?
Yeah, but people don't want to pay unless they know their transaction, you know, they've got a buyer and it's going to go through. I've literally had sellers pull out for no apparent reason. They've put the property on the market, they found a buyer and the seller's gone, well, I'm not selling now, and they've disappeared. You know, I had a seller lose his temper with us. I was at the point of reporting to my client and offering him a date within 2 weeks. He pulled out and said, oh, this has been going on for 6 months. And I said, what 6 months? I didn't get paperwork till April. He'd marketed the property in January and I was going to give him a date in June. And he pulled out, and the estate agent couldn't talk him out of not selling for love nor money. But then you've got sellers who sell, but then haven't found anywhere they need to buy. So it's all these things that need to be juggled and people's patience that need to be managed.
Hamish, none so strange as folk.
It's back to the same thing as education. People, I think people have been subdued. And when we speak about AI as well, only complicates the issue.
Yeah.
Because we're told, hey, Amazon can do this in 24 hours.
Sure.
Somebody else can do that. And so all of a sudden, people are walking in almost to sort of say, hey, look, can you give me that house over there? And you sort of pick it up and you walk away with it under your arm. It doesn't work like that. There are so many people involved. You get the right people involved and you can simplify the situation. However, you still have complicated issues to go through. And we do not have enough people dealing with the complicated issues at the moment. They are trying to simplify it too much in a situation where it cannot be simplified. So we do need to gather those important people together, but we need enough of them. We need plenty more Zaras in the sort of field of play, but we also need, the most important thing is to try and educate people as to the best way of actually going about things. Start things right off the front way, right? Work with the right solicitor in the first place.
Yes.
This is a big problem. People trying to cut corners at the start, they're not getting involved. Working with the estate agent who just wants to get it sold. There has to be this realization from that front end that, hey, look, the best thing we can do for anybody buying this property is to give them the best information. And okay, they need to ideally start working with the solicitor at the very start of it if they're going to be sellers. So they can't be working with any of the, I was going to say cheapskates. Is that the wrong word? I'm not so sure actually is, but
we can use that.
But something of that, you need to work with the right people right the way through. And there are ways of doing that. And we know about those.
Well,
it's hard to find them so far, but
as ever, it's all about surrounding yourself with people who have got the right levels of knowledge and who are willing not just to give you all the information, but to actually refine it so you get the best information to enable you to make the sensible decisions. As ever, sage advice from all around. Zara Olibukas from Nexa Law, thank you so much. Silas J. Lees, Maverick Movement. Do check out WikiWham as well. And Hamish McClay of Search Convey, who set this together, who representing IPSA, the Independent Personal Search Agents. And I would say to everyone watching, don't think that obviating responsibility onto an automated AI system is actually going to save you money, time, effort, or indeed sanity in the long term. Know the topic, understand what you're letting yourself in for. Speak to a decent lawyer like Zara, who's not going to pull her punches and tell you exactly what it is. And then once you hear the information, take the advice. Oh, It's frustrating even hearing it. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking part. And all of you watching, I've seen a whole bunch of people flooding in and out. I hope you found it useful. Do stay tuned for tomorrow at 1 o'clock. We have Cladding Matters, which is a big one. We issued an ultimatum to Greenwich Council to come clean or be named and shamed, and we'll have to see how that goes. 1 o'clock is the place to be. Cladding Matters. Until then, please keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars. In these troubled times, please surround yourself with decent people and look after your mental health. Bye-bye now.